January 1945. A frozen Dutch village holds its breath. Snow crusts the rooftops. Canals are sealed shut like sheets of glass. Then a sound breaks the silence. Engines. Low, heavy, growing closer. Inside dark houses, children press their faces to frost-bitten windows. Their cheeks are hollow. Their eyes are too big. Mothers pull scarves tighter around thin necks, not just from the cold, but from fear learned over 5 years of occupation. Then it happens. The smell hits first. Warm stew, fresh bread, coffee, impossible smells in a winter of starvation. Canadian trucks roll into the street, tires cracking ice, exhaust steaming into the air. Soldiers climb down slowly, cautiously, boots crunching, faces calm but alert, no shouting, no cheering. Just quiet movement and metal containers radiating heat. Mothers whisper to each other, barely daring to believe it. They brought food. They brought food at last. Hands tremble as bowls are passed forward. Steam rises. A child laughs, then stops, unsure if it's allowed. For months, hunger ruled this place. Today, mercy arrives on armored wheels. And here's the question. In a war defined by destruction, can a single hot meal become an act of liberation? If stories like this matter, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what would you whisper in that moment? By late 1944, the Netherlands was no longer just occupied, it was being slowly starved. Nearly 5 years of German control had stripped towns down to their bones. Windows were boarded. Streets were silent. Food had become a memory rather than a certainty. In the western provinces, the winter that followed would be remembered by one name alone: the hunger winter. Coal was gone. Electricity was rationed or cut entirely. Railways had been sabotaged, bridges destroyed, and flooded fields turned farmland into frozen wasteland. Civilians burned furniture for warmth. Sugar beets, boiled tulip bulbs, and watered-down soup became daily survival. The cold was merciless, and hunger was constant. September 1944, the front lines stalled. German forces dug in behind rivers and dikes, turning the flat Dutch landscape into a defensive maze. Progress for the Allies was slow and dangerous, every village potentially mined, every road covered by artillery or snipers. Canadian forces were tasked with a critical role in this deadlock. Their objective was not only liberation, but logistics. Clearing the Scheldt estuary to reopen the port of Antwerp became essential. Without it, Allied supply lines would collapse, and so would civilian survival. As Canadian units pushed north, they moved through flooded fields, knee-deep mud, and freezing rain. Vehicles bogged down, men slept wet, rations were stretched. Yet unlike the civilians they encountered, Canadian soldiers were still fed, still supplied, still warm. And they saw the difference immediately. Field reports described hollow faces, frostbitten hands, children too weak to run, mothers who stood silently, conserving energy, watching soldiers with a mix of fear and fragile hope. Villages learned to listen. The distant rumble of engines, the crunch of boots, the direction of the wind, because every sound could mean death or salvation. By early 1945, Canadian convoys began carrying more than ammunition and fuel: insulated containers, field kitchens, bread, coffee, hot stew. Food became part of the battlefield. And in frozen streets across the Netherlands, anticipation spread faster than any military order. Mothers whispered to one another. Children were told to wait. Elders leaned on walls and canes, preparing themselves to witness something they had not felt in months. Relief. But liberation was never guaranteed. German units still held pockets of resistance. One wrong move could bring gunfire into a village square. Aid had to be delivered with precision, fast enough to save lives, careful enough to avoid massacre. This was the reality Canadian soldiers stepped into. A war of guns and mud, of hunger and frost, and of civilians hanging on, one rumor, one convoy, one warm meal at a time. Hunger does something strange to people. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. By January 1945, Dutch mothers had learned how to survive on silence. They skipped meals without announcing it. They watered soup until it was barely soup at all. They taught children to chew slowly, to pretend they were full, to save crumbs for tomorrow. Many of these women had already buried neighbors. Some had buried children. Others lived with the constant fear that tomorrow would demand the same price. The hunger winter was not just physical starvation, it was psychological erosion. Days blurred together in cold rooms. Hope became dangerous because hope made disappointment unbearable. Then the Canadians came closer, not as heroes in posters, but as tired men with frostbitten fingers, mud-caked uniforms, and eyes that had seen too much already. Canadian soldiers noticed the mothers first, not the flags, not the cheers. The women standing slightly apart, watching everything. They saw how mothers positioned themselves between soldiers and children, how they hesitated before stepping forward, how gratitude fought with fear. Years of occupation had taught them a brutal lesson. Authority could not be trusted. Canadian leadership understood this. Officers instructed troops to move calmly. No shouting, no sudden gestures. Weapons kept lowered. Discipline mattered not just tactically, but morally. A frightened crowd could turn a humanitarian moment into chaos in seconds. And the soldiers understood something else too. They were eating. The civilians were not. Field kitchens became tools of trust. Hot meals were not distributed casually, they were delivered deliberately, at secure points, in daylight, with sentries posted. Every bowl of stew passed hand to hand carried a message stronger than any speech. You are no longer invisible. For many soldiers, this was deeply personal. Letters home spoke of guilt about eating well while children nearby starved. Others wrote that feeding civilians reminded them why they had crossed an ocean to fight. Leadership reinforced that idea. Canadian commanders emphasized that liberation was not complete until civilians could survive the winter. Feeding people stabilized villages. It reduced panic. It prevented looting. It restored order faster than force ever could. But beyond strategy, there was something simpler. A shared humanity, a mother watching her child eat, a soldier watching that mother exhale for the first time in months. Unpredictability defined these moments. No two villages reacted the same way. Some wept openly, others stayed silent. Some children smiled immediately. Others stared, unsure whether warmth could be trusted. And yet, the pattern repeated. Hunger softened. Fear loosened its grip. And whispers replaced silence. In those whispers, soft, trembling, almost afraid to exist, was the return of something the war had nearly erased. Hope. Nothing about delivering food in a war zone was simple. For Canadian units moving through the Netherlands in early 1945, every decision carried weight. A stopped truck could mean relief, or it could mean an ambush. A gathered crowd could be a celebration or a disaster waiting for a single rifle shot. So planning mattered. Convoys were organized carefully. Armored vehicles led the way, scanning windows, rooftops, tree lines. Engineers moved ahead of kitchens, checking bridges weakened by sabotage, roads mined or flooded by retreating German forces. Routes were chosen not for speed, but for control. Timing was everything. Meals had to arrive during daylight, when visibility reduced the risk of panic or friendly fire. Distribution points were selected where streets widened, village squares, crossroads, open courtyards, places where soldiers could form protective arcs, while civilians approached in manageable numbers. Inside the trucks, insulated containers were packed tight. Stew prepared hours earlier still needed to be hot. Bread wrapped carefully to keep it from freezing. Coffee stored like medicine. These were not luxuries, they were lifelines. Soldiers rehearsed without calling it rehearsal. Who would serve? Who would watch the crowd? Who would scan for threats? Who would step in if fear turned into chaos? Young infantrymen were briefed on restraint. No sudden movements. No raised voices. Children first, mothers next. Elders assisted. Weapons slung, but ready. Many of these soldiers had trained for assaults, not acts of mercy. Yet here, discipline mattered more than aggression. A single mistake, an accidental discharge, a misunderstood gesture could undo everything. As convoys neared villages, silence often fell. Engines lowered. Orders passed in whispers. Soldiers felt the tension before they saw the people. Because preparation wasn't only tactical, it was emotional. Men braced themselves for what they knew they would see. Hunger written on faces, bodies weakened by months of deprivation, eyes that searched for danger even in kindness. No manual prepared them for that. The last meters into a village were always the hardest. The moment when soldiers committed, when trucks slowed, when there was no turning back. Food was ready, positions were set, and winter waited. As the convoy rolled closer, the danger didn't fade, it sharpened. Frozen streets narrowed vision, snow muffled sound. Every doorway felt like a hiding place. Canadian soldiers scanned upper windows, where curtains barely moved, fingers brushing triggers without raising weapons. Then came the first microshock. A sharp crack. Not a gunshot wood snapping under a boot. Still, the column halted instantly. Children froze. Mothers pulled them back without a word. Soldiers spread out, forming a quiet perimeter. Breath held, eyes searching for motion that never came. Seconds passed. Long seconds. Then a hand signal. Move. Another jolt. A man broke from a doorway too quickly. A mother screamed. Two soldiers stepped forward fast, but stopped themselves just in time. The man wasn't a threat. He was holding an empty bowl. His hands shook so badly it rattled. Tension leaked into the air like steam. Every step forward carried risk. German rearguards were known to fire into crowds deliberately, hoping chaos would slow Allied movement. Snipers sometimes waited for moments of maximum vulnerability. And yet, the convoy did not turn back. A child slipped on ice. A soldier lunged instinctively and caught him, helmet bumping the child's head, both of them startled. The boy stared up, eyes wide, then smiled. That smile traveled faster than orders ever could. Mothers began whispering again. Not warnings, not prayers. Reassurance. Soldiers felt it. The shift, fear loosening, replaced by something fragile and dangerous: trust. This was the most volatile moment of all. Because trust meant crowds would grow, and crowds meant exposure. Commanders gave the signal. Stop here. Engines cut. Steam rose. Metal lids lifted just enough for heat to escape, carrying the smell of stew across the square. And in that instant, before the first bowl was filled, everyone understood what was about to happen. A war zone was about to become a kitchen. If this story is hitting you, comment "Remember" below, so these moments don't disappear. The ladles were lifted. The first ladle dips into the container. Steam erupts. It curls into the frozen air like smoke, thick and fragrant, carrying the unmistakable scent of real food, meat, vegetables, salt. The smell alone makes knees weaken. For some, it's almost painful. A Canadian soldier steps forward slowly, kneeling so he's eye level with a child. He fills a bowl carefully, not to the brim so it won't spill, so it won't be wasted. He hands it over with both hands. The child doesn't take it. Not yet. He looks at his mother first. She nods. Only then do small fingers close around the warm metal. The heat shocks him. He gasps, then laughs. A sharp, surprised sound like he's forgotten how laughter works. That sound changes everything. The line begins to move. Mothers step forward, whispering constant instructions, slowly, carefully. Don't drop it. Some are crying without realizing it. Tears freeze on cheeks. No one wipes them away. Soldiers work methodically. Scoop, pass, step back, scan rooftops, scoop again. Boots crunch, bowls clink, steam rises. A mother receives a bowl, then another for her youngest. She presses her forehead briefly against the rim, not in prayer, but in disbelief. Behind her, an elderly man steadies himself against a wall, watching as if afraid the scene will vanish if he blinks. The war doesn't disappear, but it fades. No shouting. No cheering. Just eating. Every movement is deliberate. Every second stretches. Soldiers feel the vulnerability of the moment, keenly, backs exposed, attention divided. Fingers still brush rifles between servings. Yet nothing interrupts it. This is the pivot. The instant where months of hunger collide with minutes of mercy. And once the first bowl is finished, the village exhales. What follows is not chaos, in the way war usually knows it. It is quieter, stranger, almost sacred. Children begin to eat too fast. Mothers slow them, breaking bread into smaller pieces, forcing pauses. Spoons clatter against bowls with a sound sharper than gunfire in the still air. Steam fogs faces. Breath and warmth mix, turning the square hazy, unreal. Then, laughter. One child laughs. Then another. The sound spreads cautiously, like something fragile being tested. Soldiers glance at each other, surprised. Some smile without meaning to. Others swallow hard, eyes fixed on the task to keep emotion from breaking discipline. An elderly woman drops her spoon. A Canadian private retrieves it instantly, wipes it clean with his sleeve, and hands it back as if this were the most important mission of the war. She grips his hand for a second too long. He doesn't pull away. Mothers whisper constantly now, "God bless you." They're real. Eat. Eat while it's hot. The sun breaks briefly through the cloud cover, glinting off helmets, off frozen rooftops, off tears. Long shadows stretch across the square, soldiers and civilians standing together in the same cold light. From the far edge of the village, German troops watch from withdrawal routes and tree lines. Some record the scene in field notes, others look away. Their authority here is finished not by gunfire, but by stew. Canadian officers keep time. They know they can't stay forever. More villages wait. More hunger lies ahead. But for these minutes, this square belongs to life. This is survival, not dramatic, not loud, but undeniable. And this is where history quietly turns. If moments like this matter more than battles, like the video, because war isn't only about who wins, but who survives. The container's empty. The last bowls are filled. And the convoy prepares to move again. The change is not dramatic, but it is unmistakable. Children move differently. They sit upright. They speak louder. Color returns, faintly, to cheeks that have known only gray. Mothers watch closely, counting every swallow, measuring relief in small, careful victories. Canadian field notes record it plainly. Civilian morale improved immediately. Warmth does more than feed the body. It calms the mind. Panic recedes. Crowds thin in an orderly way. People return to homes with bowls held like fragile treasures. For the soldiers, the effect is just as real. Men who had spent weeks advancing under fire now stand quietly, absorbing what they've done. Some write letters that night. Others say nothing at all. The act of feeding civilians becomes a reminder that their presence here has meaning beyond territory and maps. Village leaders approach officers, hats in hand, voices unsteady. There are no speeches, just thanks, just nods, just understanding. Word spreads quickly. Other villages hear that the Canadians did not just liberate, they fed. Mothers prepare bowls in advance. Children wait at corners. Hope begins to travel faster than fear ever did. Allied photographers capture only fragments, hands passing bread, steam rising into winter air, children eating carefully. These images will later define how liberation is remembered. Not as chaos, not as revenge, but as care. If you believe stories like this should be remembered, comment humanity below. The convoy moves on, but something stays behind. What happened in that village did not stay in that village. Across the Netherlands, similar scenes followed. As Canadian forces advanced through early 1945, thousands, eventually tens of thousands of civilians received hot meals, rations, blankets, and medical aid. In a winter that had already taken too many lives, these acts saved countless others. The impact went beyond survival. Trust returned. Civilians cooperated with Canadian units, guiding them through safe routes, warning of mines, and identifying abandoned German positions. Stabilized villages meant smoother logistics, safer roads, and faster liberation. Compassion became a force multiplier. Dutch municipal records, church journals, and family diaries preserved the same detail again and again. The food was hot, not just edible hot. That detail mattered. It meant care. It meant intention. German reports from the same period tell a different story. Retreating units described growing civilian noncompliance and disbelief. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Occupation had ruled through deprivation. Liberation arrived with nourishment. After the war, this memory hardened into something permanent. Canadian soldiers were not remembered only as liberators, but as caretakers. The Netherlands would later formalize this bond through commemorations, cemeteries, and annual ceremonies honoring Canadian sacrifice. Flags would fly, names would be read aloud, gratitude would be inherited. For many Dutch families, the story passed down was not about tanks or gunfire. It was about a bowl, a whisper, a moment when survival felt possible again. That is the legacy of those meals. Not strategy, not victory alone, but humanity, delivered under fire. In the quiet aftermath, the war shrinks to moments like these. A steaming bowl, passed carefully from soldier to mother. The fragile exhale of relief. Children learning what warmth feels like after months of cold. These moments reveal the duality of conflict. Destruction intertwined with compassion. Fear countered by courage. Canadian troops, trained for battle, became bearers of mercy. Civilians, hardened by famine, rediscovered trust and resilience. History often remembers battles, maps, and treaties, but it is these intimate human connections that endure. A village fed in winter is not just survival, it is a reclamation of dignity, hope, and the quiet proof that humanity can persist even in the harshest conditions. Every whisper of gratitude, every shared bowl, every cautious smile carries meaning far beyond the battlefield. They remind us that even amidst devastation, kindness persists, and survival is a communal act. If this story moved you, comment, like, and subscribe to honor the moments that define our shared humanity.